GNOME. No, not that kind of GNOME. Go away. GNOME. Yeah, that's the one. So, GNOME is a very nice desktop environment. It's the most popular one basically for Linux because the most popular distributions use it as like default. It's not like a standalone window manager, it's a full desktop environment. And the thing is, there's some very weird stuff to it, and I'll get that. But for now, I have resorted to documenting my entire GNOME progress. I've documented everything I've changed in GNOME, including the settings, the tweaks, and even my folder structure, and like all of my extensions that I have installed to further modify GNOME, and also all the settings I have done in those extensions, which is quite a lot. Uh, but why would I do this? Can't I just copy my dot files? I kind of can. So the way GNOME works is it doesn't have like a .config directory, the way that something like a standalone window manager would do. Instead, it uses this thing called dconf, and it's a bit different, but fundamentally you can use a command to dump like either all of your like system configs from dconf or like only the GNOME stuff, and you can take what you want. And you can dump out like these config files or database files actually technically for dconf, and you can use those to back up your config settings and like bring them back. And I mean I also have that set up. But here's the thing. Here's the problem with that. GNOME isn't a simple window manager. When you download like IceWM or like Qtile or DWM or whatever, you can expect that things will, kind of stay the same and they'll use like the same way of configuration for a long time. Whatever config file you had in one version will at least mostly work in the next, and even if it does fail, it will typically be very clear what you need to change, and it will typically be only like a small thing. So it's easy to change, but GNOME isn't like that. It's a full desktop. It's a combination of all kinds of complex, weird things. And because it's a combination of all kinds of weird things, you have the visual stuff, you have the all kinds of functional stuff in the background, besides window management, all is connected. So because it does all of that, it's going to do work a bit differently. And because of that, when they update something, it can change how something works in like your actual use case. And this complication means that your backup file might break. It might stop working at any time. Some parts might keep working, some parts might become broken. Maybe your entire desktop will break, who knows? It's not that reliable when you're changing versions, and also GNOME is quite known for just changing things and going for progress, even if it breaks like extensions, for example. And also this has remove features, change features, so all of these like previous settings might not work, your extensions might break, so or some setting in your extensions might break, something like this. I mean, in the GNOME 45, they're breaking every extension. So, this kind of stuff can happen. That backup database you had has a actually very reasonable chance of not becoming entirely functional. And, it's going to be really hard to troubleshoot as well, because if, for example, an extension is broken, you'll now have to look through and figure out what setting in the extension is causing this. Is it the extension entirely? Is it even which extension even is it? For example, if you're so on, it's hard to say. Maybe your extension doesn't even work, and then everything gets weird. It's very hard to know what happens. Of course, typically dconf will only apply what works, but it's possible that something works but doesn't actually work well. So, it's a bit of a weird situation. And because of that, I wouldn't rely on that. I decided, okay, I'm going to write down all of this in detail, because what I can do now is I can take those settings I've written down manually, I can go implement them one by one, and if something breaks, I know what it is that broke the thing. I know what extension broke something, like my top bar or whatever. I know what setting in the extension did that. I know everything because I'm doing it one by one. I know the details of it, and that allows me to see like easier do that. And that's why I recommend you the same thing, because yeah, you can back up your GNOME deconf settings, whatever, sure, but like it's not going to keep working forever. And I suppose that a written documentation will actually remain functional as long as settings are there, even if the implementation of settings changes. Like, even if the way they programmed the thing changed, even if the actual setting name changed, if the functional setting is there, like, you'll know what to do. If some setting broke, you'll be able to modify the rest and have the rest, like, known to you. And the broken setting, like, you don't have to do it. And it will all be written down, and you'll know what it is as you change the things, as opposed to reverse engineering it or like troubleshooting all of it manually afterward. And it will just overall be a more like long lasting thing. And you also don't have to like make a complete new backup on a future occasion. You can just like modify the parts you want to modify. Or what if you go to a different desktop environment? For example, it's running XFCE. I use XFCE for like half a year. Then you go back to GNOME, and then you start doing like some new GNOME changes, and or maybe your workflow preferences have changed, so you do some different changes. But then you want to implement your old changes, but you don't want to completely take every aspect of it. You want to like, for example, your old title bar, but then you want to have new shortcuts, or you want to have like new navigation shortcuts, but you want to keep your old like launch shortcuts, and so on. So there's all of these changes that can happen, and this flexibility that you can have by documenting it. Of course, like as a general backup, just taking the backup file that you made is more convenient. But for long term, just having your like settings documented in like just to be able to reference individual bits of it, it's I think super useful if you modify your GNOME a lot, and it's what I have done, and I think it will come in useful because it will be a more long-lasting solution than the backup I made. So yeah, it's all linked down below, so you can check it out. And with that, goodbye.